Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Today, we're continuing our look and deep dives into some tabloids from the period just after Elvis passed away, in that 6-month period between late August and, or I guess less than 6 months, December, maybe into January, February 1978. And we're going to start by listening to a song. Welcome, Cali Girl. Thank you so much for coming. Hi, Keith. Thank you so much for coming. And Cali Girl asked, is Ricky Stanley the brother that passed away? Because we're going to be looking at some Ricky Stanley statements today. And yes, he is the brother that passed away. So he is no longer with us. Hi, Gunn. Hi, Marion. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate seeing you here. We're going to come into these tabloids with a song, and this song is called Frustration and Heartache.
He walked through the chapel, vows gone too fast. Flashbulbs were burning, but the moment didn't last. He carried us singing, sunlight in their bed, but the silence kept whispering inside her head. He's stuck in a hotel of love he can't hold. Every room is crowded, every story grows cold. Frustration's his shadow, it won't let him be. Heartbreak keeps knocking, old flames he can see. He called her my wife, kissed her in the light. She cooked his bacon, held him through the night. But her picture was simple, just two alone, while the world kept intruding. Love turned to stone. Their eyes met again, the fire still strong. He dropped to one knee, said he loved her all along. But the door closed behind them, the moment couldn't stay. She felt the heat fading as he walked away on the speedway. He said she fell in too deep. He kissed her softly, a secret she keep. I'm sorry, he whispered, then he let her go. Now she treasures the memory more than you'll know. He's stuck in a hotel of love he can't hold. Every room is haunted, every story grows cold. Frustration and heartache, they echo through time. 3 women, 1 singer, lost in the ride. If love's a hotel, he's trapped in the hall. Doors keep on closing, he can't find home at all.
Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we're going to hear more echoes of the tabloids that were printed after Elvis passed away. In that period between August and December 1977, and it stretched on farther. But we're kind of looking at this little period right now. And we've been looking at this magazine, The Only Woman Elvis Ever Loved, Priscilla, Her Story, which appears to be done from an interview that they've done with Priscilla. We haven't really verified that yet. Haven't really verified that this magazine is being printed by Rupert Murdoch, but a lot of this stuff shows up in the Star. However, the Star, it also pulls from other sources. And in this particular magazine, we were looking at an article where it was talking about Elvis throwing wild parties at the Graceland Mansion. And then they quoted a teenage girl that they said, well, she wasn't teenage anymore, I don't think, but they said she was a teenage girl at these parties. And her name was Ellen Pollan. And so you might remember that name from, I think it was 2 episodes ago. And they used some quotes from Ellen to indicate that it was odd to be there, that it was these guys that had come out of the army with him, and it was a little bit salacious. She didn't actually say anything that was terrible, but they paired it with this idea that there's these wild parties going on at Graceland. So I found where they pulled these quotes from Ellen Pollan. And they're out of Elvis, the biography by Jerry Hopkins. Now, Jerry, he's a big Elvis fan. He didn't write a book that was salacious or terrible about Elvis. He wrote what most fans believed about Elvis at the moment that Jerry wrote the book, which was in the early 70s. And then he updated it after Elvis passed away. But they're pulling this from the first version of the book, the one that Jerry already published. And in this book, there's another girl that's at the party, or at these parties. And it turns out that these parties, well, they're not at Graceland at all. They're in California. They're at 565 Perugia Way. And the unknown girl, because Jerry doesn't give a name to her, which is probably why they didn't quote her in this magazine, but also what she says here. It says, we were offered soft drinks and given the run of the house. Well, this is quite a party so far. They have been offered soft drinks. And then she says, I found Elvis in a back room, seated at the center of a horseshoe-shaped couch, feet up on the coffee table, captain's hat on his head, with half a dozen girls seated on the couch on either side of him. So this girl is saying that there's a large couch, Elvis is in the middle, there's 3 girls on either side. And this is sometime in the middle 60s. So this is not in the 1970s. This isn't a party that's leading to Elvis's death. This is not after Priscilla. This is probably while Priscilla's in the picture. She's just not here at Perugia Way at this party. Now, what Ellen said about the party is it was a very strange scene up there. This is the part they quoted in the magazine. It was a very strange scene up there. Nobody talked. All these guys he was in the army with, and some that were from Memphis. I could tell there was a pecking order. The girls would sit around and they'd talk to this one or that one. They'd go to Lamar maybe, and from him to Sonny, and finally you'd get to Gene Smith, who was Elvis's cousin. And from Gene, you were supposed to get to Elvis, although it never worked out that way. Now, the magazine didn't quote all those names that Ellen mentioned, which is Lamar, Sonny West, Lamar is Lamar Fike, Sonny West, and Gene Smith. And Callie Girl says that she'd heard that Elvis had said that Priscilla and Lisa were the best thing that ever happened to him. He loved his family. I think that's true. And Ellen said, you could hear them plotting. Now, who's she talking about? Who's plotting? Is it the guys? The guys are plotting for how they're going to get these girls, or? Well, here's the they, the them. There were 20 or 30 there every time he had one of those parties, which was really a sort of open house. So Ellen's talking about the other girls. She can hear the other girls plotting. Ellen says the girls were always jockeying for position, sitting on the couch, not too close, but close enough within eye range. Now, what I find interesting about this is that Ellen has just talked about a pecking order that she could sense, and she implied it was among the guys. But when Ellen actually lists out what the pecking order is, it's among the girls. They're jockeying for position. That's a pecking order. They're sitting on the couch, not too close, but close enough within eye range. They're fighting for these positions. Ellen says you'd see Elvis looking around, and he'd look at a girl and she'd smile. Or if he looked as if he were about to look at a girl, she'd smile. And as soon as he looked away again, she'd drop the smile. So Ellen notices that there's a false happiness happening. They're trying to attract Elvis's attention with their smiles and hoping to be as attractive as possible when he's looking at them. And then Ellen says, no one talked to each other. Now, I believe this is what Ellen was referring to that was mentioned in this magazine, that no one was talking to each other. It's not that the guys aren't talking to anybody. It's that these girls aren't talking to each other. And everyone's trying to listen for what Elvis is going to say. So it's unnaturally quiet at this party. But she says no one ever talked to each other. I went over to one girl to admire her boots, and she would not talk to me. Then I realized you can't talk to someone when they're working. And these girls were working. Most of the girls were in their 20s. Some were 16. And I was the child of the group. Some of them were starlet types. Not the Tuesday Weld variety, more like John Lund. Or Lund, maybe? I'm not familiar with John Lund. But what this young lady is telling us is that all of these women were there for a single purpose. They wanted to be with Elvis, and they were willing to make up their own pecking order to fit into whatever pecking order they believed that the guys had, Because when Ellen's saying once you got to Gene, which I think she's saying she made it to Gene, I don't know. But then you don't get to Elvis because there's not really a pecking order like that. That's just what the girls think. No one's really getting to Elvis. I think he's only choosing who he wants to be with, right? So you don't work your way up through the ranks. Somehow these girls have gotten this impression, but Ellen's not telling us where this impression came from other than from her own thoughts as she sat here at the party and she noticed no one's talking, and then she understands that they're working, they're focused, they're trying to get to Elvis. Now, Ellen says that this Jana Lund was one of them, supposed to be Elvis's girlfriend, for a while anyway. You know the type, the ones who played the bad girls in all the rock movies. But they weren't in the movies, they were just that type. It was weird. Now Ellen's going to tell us what they actually did at these parties, other than sit around and not talk. Ellen says we'd sit around watching television. That's what we did 75% of the time. Nobody'd ever laugh at anything unless Elvis did. If Elvis laughed, everybody'd just roar. Not more than Elvis laughed, but just as much. Can you imagine that you're at these parties, that you're Elvis, and everybody is just, they're not themselves. They're all waiting to somehow please you in some weird way. I mean, I think it would be fun at first. But if you did this every day, it would get kind of terrible, I would think. That these reactions from these people about these laughs, that they're not real. They're only laughing because you've laughed. And that this young teenager can see all this. She's able to perceive it all happening. And that 75% of the time at these wild parties, you're watching television, and the other 25% you're not talking to whoever's next to you and drinking soda. That seems to be what she's telling us. That came out of Jerry Hopkins' book. That was partially repeated in this magazine, but used to make it look more salacious. So I wanted to get that correction in there from Jerry's book before we move forward. And we're going to move on to this magazine, which is A Star Magazine, September 6th, 1977. Now, Elvis passed away on August 16th, 1977, so this is less than a month later. And we can see that on the cover, it's talking about Elvis, what happened? And it talks about reading the book the world is talking about. Well, that's the Elvis What Happened book. And then it says Priscilla. And I think that's a picture of Priscilla, and it says she was his only true love. Plus, there's an Elvis color photo souvenir. And biorhythms foretold the fatal story. And Marion says that to her, the parties like that sound terrible. And that she wants all of her guests to have fun with each other. I would think that's what Elvis wants, and that's the fun parties as well. So this actually sounds excruciating. And maybe that's why they didn't do these open houses very often. Maybe these open houses were more for the guys so that they could have an opportunity to meet these women. I don't know. And Cali Girl mentions that Elvis never wanted to move out of Graceland because his mother picked out the house. That might be very true. Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And so let's take a look at what this magazine has to say. It says that Elvis was still pleading with his ex-wife Priscilla to come back to him. And that you can see as the title of this particular article, which we'll look at some sections of. The article says Elvis Presley had only one true love. Among the movie stars and beauty queens who tried to share his life, Priscilla, the army brat he wooed when she was only 14. So that's how the article starts out. I think we know which way the article's going to lean. Now, where would this magazine get the information that Elvis Presley had only one true love? Did Elvis tell them that? Are they assuming it because he was only married once? And Pat says that this is Priscilla's words, not Elvis. This is why I think that the publication we looked at before is linked to the Star publication. That they're not just lifting these words, that this is part of a package interview deal that happened with Priscilla. Some big interview, and now they've cut it up into multiple publications, including the special 1977-1978 one that we just looked at, and then these weekly Star magazines that they put out. It could be that they've just lifted this from elsewhere, though, as we've just seen with Jerry Hopkins. I haven't been able to truly confirm anything about where this original interview was from. Maybe we'll see it in full at some point. This article says only a week before his death, Priscilla confided to a friend that Elvis still wanted her back. Well, that's the evidence of the article. A week before his death, Priscilla confided to her friend, or a friend, it doesn't even say her friend, that Elvis still wanted her, which I guess is Priscilla, back. And so the article is saying that that's how they know that she was the only love of Elvis's life. Priscilla told somebody. And they're not naming who was told because, well, I don't know. They don't say why they don't name it. This person wants to remain anonymous for some reason. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for coming. Hi, Deborah. Thank you for coming too. Appreciate seeing both of you here. According to the friend, this is what Priscilla told them. She said, he's always calling to tell me he loves me and wants me to come to Memphis. He's always saying how sick he is and that he needs me. Now, I kind of think this might be possible that he called her and said these things. I don't doubt that he always loved her. I'm not saying in a romantic sense, but enough to say, I love you and mean it. She is the mother of his child. And that he wants her to come to Memphis. She's in California. She has custody of Lisa. I'm sure he would like her to be in Memphis, where he could have easier access to Lisa. Priscilla also says that Elvis is always saying how sick he is. Well, we know that in the 70s, especially in that last year, he was sick. And she says, Elvis says he needs me. Maybe he does need some kind of emotional support from Priscilla, or maybe he needs her to stop putting a lien on Graceland. I think some people are showing some evidence that there's a lead on Graceland during this period. Maybe he needs her to bring Lisa to be near him. She doesn't really go further than that, at least not within this quote that the friend tells us. But the article says days later, Elvis was dead. Vernon Presley sent his boy's jet to bring Priscilla from Los Angeles to Memphis. Priscilla sobbed uncontrollably as she entered Graceland less than 12 hours after the discovery of the body. So we've seen other report from the other magazine that we just looked at that I think is linked to this one. And it said Priscilla was very calm. She went around, calmed other people down, made everyone feel comfortable while she was there. This is really the first report we've had that Priscilla sobbed uncontrollably as she entered Graceland. I mean, investors told us that she came there, so we know that she got there that night, but we've never heard that she sobbed uncontrollably. And Callie says that Elvis spoke of Priscilla with profound love, often saying, "I'll always love Priscilla. We met as friends, we part as friends." Gunn points out that she did him great harm. And guys, the chat is moving fast, so I am going to be missing some chats, and I do apologize for that. Everything that you guys say is very important to me, and I do scroll through them all later and take a look at everything. You guys bring a lot of knowledge to the chat and to the live stream that I wouldn't be able to get otherwise, so I do appreciate it. Hi, Luann. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And Marian's saying that if Priscilla comes to Graceland, she's bringing Lisa with her. Exactly. Exactly. And Callie Girl says that Priscilla felt Elvis was supposed to give her more money after the divorce, and that some lady friend helped her to get that more money. And Pat says that Vernon said he never wanted to get back with Priscilla. And so, yeah, there's a lot of confusion going around during this period we're looking at, and I don't know if this magazine's helping anything. It's certainly getting a certain word out to the public. And Deborah says that Elvis had love for the mother of his daughter, but not romantically. Yes, and I think the fact she was the mother of Lisa, that linked her in his mind to Gladys. That she became a reflection of Gladys, and that Elvis, he could never think anything bad about Gladys, and that made it very difficult to think bad things about Priscilla, even though things were happening. However, I don't think he was romantically attracted to her anymore. I think that's some wishful thinking on Priscilla's part, as we can see by the picture of Ginger Alden that's on this page. And Pat says that she knows Elvis wanted Lisa with him all the time. Yes. And Lisa's only across the country because of one reason. And that's because she's with her mom. So if her mom was in Memphis, we think how many problems that would solve for Elvis. And Priscilla's quoted again from the friend as saying, Elvis made me, well, actually, these are things Priscilla said in other places, but Elvis made me comfortable. He never pushed or was aggressive with me. He was very gentle. He was his own man, a very compassionate and understanding person. These are things that Priscilla said after they were divorced, but before he had passed away. Callie Girl asked, what's the name of this magazine? This magazine is The Star, from September 7th, 1977. Or September 6th, I'm sorry, September 6th, 1977. It's a Rupert Murdoch publication, Rupert's the guy who paid to have Elvis What's Happened written. And then he sold it, made a whole bunch of money when they, were able to publish it over and over. Now the guys, Red, Sonny, Dave, they only got paid once. Steve Dunleavy, he only got paid once. If Priscilla got paid for these interviews, she got paid once. Rupert, he published this stuff over and over and over, and he got paid a lot over and over and over. All the money he gave to these people, it was nothing compared to the amounts that it generated for Rupert. So if we would have tracked down a financial villain in the story of Elvis, I mean, this guy probably, even if you believe that the Colonel's the worst person ever for Elvis, and you count all the dollars that the Colonel stole, if you think that they were stolen, they don't come close to the amount of money that Rupert made from trashing Elvis after he was dead. You're seeing what's being said within these magazines. And these things are not being printed to further the truth. We are finding the truth that's in the magazines, but the magazines were not intended to further truth, at least not in my opinion. And of course, my opinion's what's fueling the show, so I may not be right. And if I'm not right, feel free to put it in the comments, put it in the chat. All opinions are welcome here. Make sure you hit that like button, that you're subscribed, and that you tell other people who you think should see this stuff that we're looking at about this period in the trashing of Elvis Presley. Then make sure that you let them know. And that they can come here to Hillbilly Cat History and they can participate in the chats and the comments, and we can all figure this out together. Priscilla is quoted as saying, "It was really an adjustment being alone after we were married. I tried to stay busy and I took up karate." Well, as far as keeping their marriage together, that move about taking up karate, that's probably a bad move. Now, I know Elvis encouraged her for it, but that was probably a bad move. And yet, here she says, and this has got to be after she was divorced that she says this, and she still states this thing about, I took up karate. You think she would shy away from that? But that's probably some biased commentary on my part. Trying to remain very unbiased. The goal here is that we don't judge people. We judge statements. We judge true, whether these statements are fabricated or whether there's truth within the statement. We try to find the truth that we can. I try not to judge anybody. I'm really not qualified to judge a person for their actions. I think I'm qualified to judge their actions. And so I don't mind saying things about those, but that's really the purpose here. And then I try to give everybody the fairest possible shot that we can through these historical lenses. And Marion says that she's read that Rupert Murdoch became the 4th richest magazine mogul. He didn't seem to care whether it was right or wrong. I wonder if the other 3 guys did. I'm going to guess they didn't either. I kind of think that's how magazines and newspapers work. And Pat says that it's hard to be fair with Priscilla. Yeah. And that's why we're going through these exercises, because it is hard. It's really easy just to trash somebody like these magazines did. But we're not going to do that. We're going to look at and we're going to weigh what's said. And we're going to try to pull this truth out, because liars tell you the truth when they lie. You simply have to listen very carefully and you will find that truth. And you really don't have to look much farther than their own. And that's the other thing we're doing here. These are Priscilla's own words. Not bringing in other people that don't like Priscilla to say bad things about her. we're just looking up apparently what she said herself. The magazine goes on and it says by 1972, Priscilla had tired of being left in the background and soon found herself in the comforting arms of her karate instructor, Mike Stone. So she found comfort in karate, kind of as she had alluded to. And Priscilla finally told Elvis, and this is what the magazine says, and I have not confirmed this date. You guys tell me if this is true. Priscilla finally told Elvis that she was in love with another man on his birthday in 1973. So they're saying this occurred on January 8th, 1973. And of course, I know the story that she had told Elvis, but I had never connected it to his birthday, which seems shocking, right? But I guess it's shocking either way. And of course, people's relationships fall apart at times, so it's not that terribly shocking, but that she would, it feels like she told him these things to hurt him. She doesn't say that here, but it's always felt that way to me. But that's a bias on my part. So I'm being open about that bias with you guys. And this says that Elvis filed for divorce, but he couldn't hide the pain. That Elvis was so upset, according to his bodyguards, that he asked one of them to arrange Mike Stone's execution. Now, why does this article mention that? Well, because this is the publication that's funding Elvis What Happened, and they're printing portions of it within the magazine. And so that is like a cross-promotional thing that they just did. Priscilla really, she didn't talk about this Mike Stone thing or the execution thing, but they've got it from Red and Sunny and Dave. And so, hey, we could mention this, and don't forget to read the next article and keep picking up the next magazine because we got more excerpts from that book coming out. And Emma says that it's heartbreaking and it makes her so cross. It's so unfair that he wasn't there to defend himself when these movies were coming out. Hi, Sarge. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate seeing you. And Gunn says that even if Priscilla said it in the paper, it's not necessarily true. That is an excellent point. Media, printed media, especially in the late 70s, has power. Once it's in print, people believe that it's true. And so it's just like Gunn says, it's nothing makes it true because it's printed. Nothing makes it true because Priscilla said it. What makes it true is that people believe it, and that is not real truth. It's a false truth that but it goes forward forever. And it just keeps rolling and rolling. And here we are in 2025. And this paper, this article could have been printed like yesterday. Because these are still the same pieces of information that are still being given out. And Linda Thompson's quoted here as saying his pride was badly hurt when he lost Priscilla to another man. He won't get over that hurt for a long, long time. So that's obviously something Linda said well before Elvis passed away, probably while she was still with Elvis, probably after that 1973 beauty event that we read about in yesterday's article. And Pat says it's even worse today once it's printed. It's even worse today because you don't have to print it. You could just put it out on the internet, which bypasses printing altogether as we used to think about it. And then it just becomes published. And because it's in written or video form even, it's easily spread around now because of our technology. So yes, it's much faster, which can be much worse today, and it reaches many more people, which is certainly worse. And Elizabeth says that she used to cry back in this time when all the stories would come out. And I'm sure there are a lot of fans that felt the same way. And how would you know whether it's true or not? How would you know? There's nothing to compare it with. There's nothing to combat any of this. It's not just that Elvis isn't there. There's no other sources. There's no books yet. Nothing's been printed except for the Star magazine and Elvis What Happened. There's that Jerry Hopkins book, but it's so old at this point, it's several years old. Surely it's all sold out, and they're trying to get it reprinted, but it hasn't really hit. And people aren't going to buy it as quick as they're going to buy this What Happened book. Pat says, can you imagine what Lisa had to go through? Yeah, because she had to come to this more like we do, which is all this stuff had already happened. By the time she really becomes aware, I mean, she's 9 years old, so obviously she's aware, but in my mind, I don't think I would have been able to deal with any of this until I was 14 or 15, at least. Maybe 18, before I realized, hey, they were saying terrible things. These aren't just articles coming out. These are all lies, and they've stretched things. But in her case, it's about not just her father, but her mom, too. It had to be really, really difficult for Lisa. And one page further in, or a few pages further in, here's reprints from Elvis What Happened. We're not really going to look at these, but just wanted you to see they're in this magazine. And then we get to another Star magazine. And this one is from September 20th, 1977. And on the front it says, Elvis believed in life after death from the best-selling book. Well, what book do you think they're talking about? Well, that's Elvis What Happened. And why is it best-selling? Because they just printed another 250,000 copies of it. So it's able to be best-selling. They got those out the weekend after Elvis passed away. And they were in the stores ready to be sold by Monday. It also says, well, it doesn't say anything else on the front of this other than another 8 pages of Elvis giant color pullouts. And Elizabeth says the Star was a horrible magazine. I agree. But that's where these people told their stories. And Rupert was the guy willing to shell the money out in order to fund their telling the stories. And that's why this stuff ended up being in here. Now, this is an amazing picture of Elvis. There's nothing said on this page. It's really just blah, blah, blah. Nothing that we learn in the print on this page, but this picture is amazing. And Marion says that a few months ago, German TV had Priscilla as a guest, and they didn't ask a single critical question, and she was angry about that. And Gunn says, what do we think then about Priscilla saying Elvis was the love of her life? Well, the point that I'm bringing out here is that she started saying it directly after Elvis passed away. Now, the truth of whether it's true or whether it's not true, it seems obvious to me which way that goes, but again, that's a very biased thing on my part. So I'm going to step away from that question, and I'm going to say we've tracked it back to at least the point that Elvis passed away. I don't know if she was truly telling people this before he passed away, as the article is hinting. I don't know if Priscilla actually thought Elvis might have wanted her to return for a romantic situation, or if Elvis had been saying things like, maybe you could come back and Lisa would be around more often, and she's hearing, I love you, can we get married again? You know, I don't know the truth of that part. And I think from things that Priscilla has said that she's not immune to self-delusion, right? And so maybe that could be the truth of it if I'm incredibly generous to her feelings, right? Hi Terry, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate you being here. But what I wanted to do was get back to how far can we trace this thing back, and it's at least right after Elvis has passed away. And it's not just Priscilla, it's Rupert Murdoch through these magazines that's helping her push this. And then, yes, Elizabeth mentions Marco. There is an entire history, life history after Elvis that might indicate that some of this is a very fanciful thoughts on her part about the ongoing romantic relationship between her and Elvis. I also think, if we're to be incredibly generous to Priscilla, that it's very, very possible that Priscilla never met anyone who gave her the kind of love that Elvis did. I think that Elvis was a very generous person with his emotions and with love, and that it's atypical of males in general. But the males that she was with, I don't think they got anywhere close to Elvis's emotional vulnerability or availability or the way that he expressed his love and generosity. I don't think any of these guys got anywhere close to that. And so it could be that she realized she'd made a major error at some point, and maybe right after he passed away, and then it's too late by then, of course. That's if we're to be extremely generous. But she was in his presence for a long time. That has to have an effect on you. And as we move into this magazine, it has an article that says, Stepbrother reveals I gave Elvis a massage only hours before he died. And so this is an interview with Ricky Stanley, who was one of the Stanley brothers. There's three Stanley brothers, Billy, Ricky, and David. Ricky's the middle one. Ricky has passed away. David and Billy are still with us. I think that to be incredibly generous to Ricky and the Stanley boys, as well as their mother Dee, their stories about their life with Elvis evolved over time. And so when we look at them early on here, directly after Elvis has passed away, they're not going to be identical to stories that they told later on. And a lot of people would chalk that up to lies. And that's maybe what it is, or other fabrications. But we just need to understand this about the Stanleys as we go in. However, we might be surprised by this story. This says Elvis Presley's heartbroken stepbrother was one of the last to see him alive. And this week, he spoke about the final hours of the rock idol's life. Did I miss a question that David has asked? And I'm the one that's maybe ignoring David. So again, I apologize. We got a lot of fast moving chat for me, which means there's 14 people here right now, which is huge for this program. So it takes a little getting used to on my part. But what this article says is that Ricky Stanley, who was also one of Elvis's bodyguards, revealed that he got a call from Presley in the early hours of the morning that he passed away. Elvis, who was with his girlfriend Ginger Alden in his Graceland mansion, wanted a massage before he played racquetball. Ricky gave Presley his rubdown. Ricky's quoted as saying, "The boss was happy. After we were done with the massage, Elvis and Ginger put on sweatsuits. They went downstairs and started playing racquetball with Joe and Billy Smith under floodlights. The magazine then identifies Billy as Elvis's cousin Billy Smith and Joe as road manager Joe Esposito." So Ricky did not get this wrong, but the magazine did. They didn't understand that Joe is the name of Billy's wife, Joe Smith. So inadvertently, this magazine has also put out wrong information, as opposed to some of the information they're putting out on purpose. And Ricky, who is 23 at the time of this article, at the time that Elvis passed away, said that he became Elvis's stepbrother after Elvis's father, Vernon, remarried. Ricky's quoted as saying, "Elvis was my brother, my idol, my father, and my boss. I would have done everything for him, and I mean everything." So this is an interesting quote because he says, "I would have done everything for him. I mean everything." And that doesn't say that he did everything for Elvis. It doesn't say Elvis asked me to do something crazy and I did it. It says I would have done everything for him. And they quote Elvis speaking to Vernon about the Stanley boys, and he said, "They will always be my kid brothers." And Ricky said, "My big brother Elvis gave us everything you can imagine." And then Ricky tells a story, and the magazine sets it up. And here's what it says: "The Memphis police arrested Ricky Stanley trying to buy Demerol, a strong pain-killing drug, with a forged prescription. Ricky was at the police station when the elevator doors opened. And Ricky, he's quoted as saying, there was Elvis, just standing there in his best suit. He embraced me and he said, 'Ricky, what have you done? If your mother finds out, she's gonna die.' Then Elvis looked at the two policemen standing next to me and he said, 'If you want to continue working here, take those handcuffs off him now, and do it now.' And the handcuffs came off. And a cop said, 'Sorry, Mr. Presley.' The magazine goes on to say that 2 weeks later, with 3 high-priced lawyers defending him, Ricky received a suspended 6-month sentence and a $50 fine. So Ricky got in some trouble, and his big brother Elvis bailed him out, came down and took care of him. And that, I think, is a wonderful story about how Elvis took care of his family. Not sure it's the lesson that Ricky needed to learn in the moment, but Elvis wasn't going to let Ricky suffer down there at the police station. Now, there is a drug mentioned here, Demerol, and we've heard Sonny West link that drug to Elvis. But the link appears to be here with Ricky Stanley. Doesn't mean Elvis didn't get this in some other way or that he didn't have a prescription himself for it. But for whatever reason, Ricky was trying to get it with a forged prescription. Like, this wasn't even on the streets. He went in and tried to trick people into giving it to him. And that's where we're going to leave it for today. But we're not done with this picture that's on here, because do any of you recognize the girl that's with Ricky? Because that's who we're going to talk about tomorrow, is this girl that's with Ricky. It's not Ricky's girlfriend. I know somebody's going to say that's Ricky's girlfriend. It's not Ricky's girlfriend. I don't think any of you have ever heard this woman's name before. And so I'm going to keep it secret till tomorrow. But until then, I'm going to leave you guys with another song. And you might be feeling it right now because I didn't tell you her name. It's Heartache and Frustration. And until I see you guys all again, thank you so much for coming today. Really appreciate having you here. And keep on taking care of business.
He walked through the chapel, vows gone too fast. Flashbulbs were burning, but the moment didn't last. He carried us singing, sunlight in their bed, but the silence kept whispering inside her head. He's stuck in a hotel, love you can't hold. Every room is crowded, every story grows cold. Frustration's his shadow, it won't let him be. Heartbreak keeps knocking, old flames you can see. He called her mine, kissed her in the light. She cooked his bacon, held him through the night. But her picture was simple, just two alone. While the world kept intruding, love turned to stone. Their eyes met again, the fire's still strong. He dropped to one knee, said he loved her all along. But the door closed behind him, the moment couldn't stay. She felt that he faded as he walked away. On the speedway set, she fell in too deep. He kissed her softly, a secret she'd keep. I'm sorry, he whispered, then he let her go. Now she treasures the memory more than you know. He's stuck in a hotel of love he can't hold. Every room is haunted, every story grows cold. Frustration and heartache, they echo through time. Three women, one singer, lost in the rhyme. Love's a hotel, he's trapped in the hall. Doors keep on closing, he can't find home at all.